School, what's the job of the emergency operator? What are they supposed to do now? Dispatch emergency responders, right? And so that's the job of the hypothalamus. When the amygdala fires, it alerts the hypothalamus calls in emergency responders. The emergency responders come from our adrenal glands, adrenaline and glucocorticoids, our stress hormones. And when the emergency responders arrive at the scene of the fire, there's a fire chief who assesses how big the blaze is. He looks how many responders we have to fight this blaze. He calls back to the emergency operator and says, hey, we've got enough. You don't need to send anymore. Even though that alarm is still blaring on your board, we've got enough. We're good. In our hippocampus, we have neurons that register the rise of the stress hormones. And when they saturate those, then they will signal back to the hypothalamus and say, hey, even though the amygdala is still firing, we've got enough stress hormones. You don't need to call for any more. At the school, there's a principal, an administrator, who assesses whether this is a real fire, some kid's playing a prank. That's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex behind your forehead, your reason to think. So how this works in real life, you're walking along one weekend in a park somewhere, you step forward in the grass, out the corner of your eye, you see something black and slithery down by your feet. What are you likely to do? Will your alarm fire? Call your emergency operator. Call in those emergency responders. Your heart rate picks up. Your blood pressure picks up. Blood is being shunted out of your organs into your muscles. You're jumping 3 steps away when your prefrontal cortex catches up and goes, it's just a rubber hose. And then you laugh that you've had something like this happen, haven't you? Now, I've just taught you a very important brain circuit. One of the jobs of your prefrontal cortex is to process the threat circuitry energy and, when appropriate, turn off the circuitry. If you hear a loud bang and it startles you, okay, everybody on this side of the room goes, oh, that's a car backfiring. That energy was sent up to the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal car backfired, turn it off, I'm fine. Everybody on this side of the room goes, that's a terrorist with a gun about to head in here. Then the same bang results in your amygdala getting more excited and you get more stress hormones. So how you process it, many people with mental health problems do not turn off their stress circuitry well. They don't do it. Why? Let me teach you another network. Salience network. What's salience? It's the relevance or significance. As sensory input comes into our brain, whether it's sight, sound, touch, and so forth, as it comes into our brain, it will pass through the thalamus on its way to its ultimate cortical destination. And as it passes through the thalamus, if it's a potential threat to you, your amygdala, your alarm, will tag that particular piece of sensory information and say, oh, there's a potential danger to you, and send it up to your prefrontal cortex for you to take action and deal with it. If it's not a threat, you generally ignore it. If you listen carefully, there's a small sound of a fan in the background in here. I can hear it. Maybe some of you can. Can some of you hear it? That fan has been blowing this entire time, sending sound waves into the atmosphere, activating your tympanic membrane, which activates your acoustic neuron, which sends that signal through your thalamus, and your brain said that's irrelevant, and you didn't even know it or were aware of it until I pointed it out to you. It was happening this week. Salience, not relevant, I don't need to pay attention. What would happen if you smelled smoke like this building was on fire smoke right now? Would your salience network let you ignore that? No, it would say it's important, pay attention, deal with that. So let me give you another analogy. You're home cooking, you have a cast iron skillet on the phone, you're on the cast iron skillet on the stove, and you are on the phone or you're watching TV, you're a little distracted, you reach out and your hand touches the hot skillet. As soon as your hand touches the hot skillet, that activates pain fibers, which go up the spinal thalamic pathway through the thalamus, and as it hits here, your amygdala will fire and send that energy up here, and I promise that no matter where your attention is, on the TV, on the phone, you won't keep your attention there. Your attention will be irresistibly drawn to your hand. Am I right or wrong? Potential threat, pay attention to that. And then it's elevated to your cortex. Your cortex says, make a plan, put a little ice on it, put your oven mitt, that's your plan, ice and oven mitt. Now you reach back out with your oven mitt, and you're relaxed, the alarm is stopped. But sometimes the salience network gets disrupted. And when it gets disrupted at the anterior cingulate cortex. So this energy, instead of being sent up here, will be sent into the orbital cortex if we're not processing. I'll tell you what blocks it at the moment. But if it's sent to the orbital cortex, what's the normal job of your orbital cortex? Normal function. The normal function is to give you a conviction of wrongdoing and redirect you away from doing inappropriate things. So if you were to try to stand up in this room right now and take your clothes off in front of the rest of us, Your orbital cortex will start firing like crazy, activating your stress circuit. You get very uncomfortable. Don't do it. Don't do it. Aren't you glad you got an orbital cortex? Trust me, so are we. So what happens though when you understand this, when we have disruptions in the salience network, then this energy gets sent to the orbital cortex, and the orbital cortex gives a conviction of wrongdoing, and it activates more amygdala firing, and you get negative ruminating loops going. Ever known anybody has negative ruminating loops? So there's a place where most people will disrupt their salience network transiently. And that's in the aftermath of a major loss. Somebody close to you has died. Suddenly, unexpectedly. You're unprepared. And the initial reaction is no. The initial reaction is no, which means no way am I going to think about that, accept that. No, it can't be. Which means we're blocking, this is the anterior cingulate cortex, your seat of your decision-making and will, and you're saying no right here. So the energy is going here. Now what's the job of the orbital cortex? Conviction of wrongdoing. So what do people who are going no do? It's my fault. If I would have kept them on the phone 10 extra minutes, they wouldn't have been in the intersection when the car ran through and hit them. It's my fault. I booked them on that airplane. If I would have booked them on a different plane, they wouldn't have been on the one that went down. It's my fault. If I would have gone over and talked to them, they wouldn't have committed suicide. It's my fault. Negative ruminating loops. So what disrupts the salience network causing this? Denial. No, not refusing the truth, refusing